Hello, everyone. Welcome to NSLI Interactive's last virtual event of the 2020 calendar year, an International Education Week panel discussion on citizen diplomacy. My name is Alexander, and I work for the NSLI program at IRN USA. My colleagues Lagaya and Kyle will be helping out with this event as well. We're so happy that you're able to join us tonight. And we're also very excited to be holding this event in the middle of International Education Week, which takes place from November 16th to November 20th this year. International Education Week, also known as IEW, is an opportunity to celebrate the benefits of international education and exchange worldwide. It is a joint initiative of the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education, and is part of our efforts to promote programs that prepare Americans for a global environment and attract future leaders from abroad to study, learn, and exchange experiences. Before we start with the presentation today, let's quickly go over some functions in Zoom. So first, of course, make sure that you're muting yourself if you're not speaking. Also, feel free to rename yourself so just your first name is shown. In addition to that, you can always type in the chat box if you have any questions, and we're going to be having a question and answer session later in the event, so please private message me any questions you might have. Video is optional, and so it's up to you if you want to turn it on or not. This event is going to begin with 4 presentations from each of our speakers. I will then ask a few questions of our panelists myself, after which time we'll open up the Q&A session to the audience, as I said before. So make sure to have some questions ready for that part of the event. During this time, you're going to be able to use the raise hand function to be called on, and you can also turn on your video and unmute yourselves in order to interact with the guest speakers. But as I mentioned, you can also feel free to type in the chat box or send a message to me, and I can ask the panelists myself. As a reminder, this event will end at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Before our speakers present, I want to give some background information for anyone not already familiar with the NSLI program. Next slide, please. So the NSLI program, or the National Language Security Initiative for Youth, is a scholarship program for American high school students funded by the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Every year, NSLI brings about 600 students overseas to study a critical language like Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Korean, Russian, Turkish, and Persian for either a summer or an academic year. Students on NSLI programs immerse themselves in the local culture, practice citizen diplomacy, and work to become experts in their language. The NSLI program has a lifelong impact, and our speakers today can attest to that. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly do a poll to find out who we have in the audience with us today. Please feel free to also share your answers to the poll in the chat box and also let us know where you're joining us from. So let me get that set up. 1 second, please. So I'm launching the poll, so please just answer it. And feel free to also share in the chat what your relationship to the NSLI program is. All right, are you getting a lot of answers in? Just got a few more left. All right, just waiting for the last few answers and then I'll close the poll. All right, I think most people have answers. So it looks like we have a lot of prospective applicants to NSLI with us. That's more than half of the people who responded, and that's great to see, this excitement for the program. And I'm also happy that a lot of NSLI alumni have joined us as well. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be hearing from 4 NSLI alumni from 4 different NSLI programs, as you can see in this image. And I'm going to give a brief introduction for each of them. So Mohammed is an alumnus of the NSLI 2020 Virtual Summer Intensive Arabic program. He's currently a senior in high school, and he plans on being an engineering major and then going to law school afterwards. And he believes that his NSLI experience was above and beyond anything he could have imagined, which is great to hear, of course. Diana is an alumna of the NSLI 2017 Summer Arabic program and also of the Kenny Luger Yes Abroad program in 2018 to 2019 in Morocco. She's a sophomore at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and is majoring in mechanical engineering and minoring in Middle Eastern studies. She's from Chicago and she is interested in learning how engineering and science can be used in international contexts. Emma is an alumna of the NSLI 2020 Virtual Summer Intensive Russian Program. She is a current student at Columbia University, but is home in Louisiana right now. Her favorite thing about NSLI this summer was having interactions with so many speakers from Moldova, including the founders of the first barbecue restaurants in Chisinau, all while being in the US. Even in a virtual environment, NSLI was a life-changing, insightful experience for her. Zenya is an alumna of the NSLI 2020 Virtual Summer Intensive Arabic Program. She is a first-year student at Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, and her senior year of high school was spent researching the photography of Moroccan artist Leila Saidi to examine beliefs of high school students in the central Pennsylvania region about gender and culture in the Middle East. She plans on continuing her passion for Middle Eastern studies, art history, and education for future international work. After we hear these speakers, I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then we will open up to the audience. Just to reiterate, you can message me at any point with a private message with a question you might have for the panelists if you don't want to ask that yourself. For those who cannot join us live today, we're recording this webinar and we'll post it on the NSLI Interactive's website later. So without further ado, I'd like to begin and turn it over to the speakers for their presentations, beginning with Mohammed. So next slide, and Mohammed, please take it away.
All right, welcome guys. So I'm glad to hear, first of all, that there's a lot of prospective NSLI-Y applicants, because a bit of my presentation is going to kind of center around what NSLI-Y offers, and as you can see here in the title, how NSLI-Y can help you become a citizen diplomat. So next slide, please. So I just wanted to start off with a little quote. You know, it's always a good icebreaker. To bring in a little quote, and it's by Madeleine Albright, as you guys may know, the first woman United States Secretary of State. And the quote reads that in an era of bluster and bombs, citizen diplomacy is the builder of bridges. I just felt that that really encompassed the true meaning of citizen diplomacy and what it means to us nowadays. That, you know, in a time where country tensions are so powerful with each other, and that tensions are, you know, rising, and, you know, foreign leaders may encounter different troubles at different times. Citizen diplomacy is a time when you can get to personally know citizens from other countries, no matter what your different beliefs are, your different backgrounds are. It's something truly unique that, you know, foreign diplomacy it cannot have, and that only citizen diplomacy holds. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a little question and answer. I just want you guys to say whatever you can in the chat. There's no wrong answers here. So in your eyes, and so go ahead and just text something in the chat. What does citizen diplomacy mean, and why is it important? So maybe what does it mean to you as a person? Because, you know, there's a lot of definitions of it. And why is it important to, you know, our ever-changing world right now? Anyone? Open the chat right here. But okay, right here we got Eugene, representing a country to make negotiations. Excellent, that's right. Yeah, challenging stereotypes. That's a unique idea. I like that. I like that right there. All citizens can be diplomats. Exactly. A form of respect for others within your country. That's interesting. I like that. Building meaningful relationships between cultures. Excellent, Michelle. Representing your country when you go abroad. Exactly. Shaping foreign relations. Citizen diplomacy. All right. Well, there's a lot here, but I'm a little bit short on time. But I'm sure all the next answers are going to be wonderful. So yeah, basically what citizen diplomacy, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So why is citizen diplomacy important? So you guys can take a look here and just read for yourselves. I'll just give a brief overall. Citizen diplomacy is unique in a way that, you know, everyone that's speaking with each other is a citizen. And sometimes people may have preconceived notions about a specific group of people from a specific country. Citizen diplomacy is there to kind of abolish that. So a lot of times when diplomats meet, you know, meeting with every single foreign leader. Citizens, on the other hand, you can be a lot more personal when you're talking with people from other countries, whether you're there to visit and you're just asking somebody for directions. That right there is an example of citizen diplomacy. Letting somebody know that, hey, I'm American and you're in, for example, if you're in Spain and you're like, yeah, I'm American. I'm here. Can you help me with directions to this place? That right there, if for example, if that person may have had like a preconceived notion how America is kind of portrayed in the media of being like kind of like headstrong and stubborn people, maybe that may have changed the notion that they may have. It brings us all together and it encourages educated conversations, and it shapes involved citizens who are engaged in the betterment of their communities. So you go ahead to the next slide, please. So now kind of to NSLI-Y citizen diplomacy, the kind of talk of what I was focusing on. So this right here in the back is my class this summer. Everything was virtual due to the pandemic, but we still had a good number of kids in our class. There's 8 students, and then our teacher, Stav. So in the top right corner, you can see that I'll talk about this a little bit later on. But her name is Umaima, and she works in Morocco with those who are less fortunate, and she owns a bakery, and then I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this for you, but just a basic gist of it. So if you go onto the NSLI website and you look at their goals of what their program, what they want to give to all their participants, a big key to it is developing linguistic and cultural skills to advance international dialogue. So just looking at that, and then the first goal of their program also very directly relates to citizen diplomacy. Just looking at that shows you what NSLI is focused on when they're working with you, what NSLI is focused on when you are either abroad or if you are online like I was, what their main focus is of the program and what the skills, the lifelong skills that they want to leave you with. So you can see what their true kind of driving force is in this whole scenario. It's to better your international dialogue here with saying and cultural skills, and being able to be a citizen diplomat wherever you go. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does NSLI help you become a citizen diplomat? So here are just 3 brief things how it helps you become a citizen diplomat. You learn the culture of the place that you study. So for example, I was going to be stationed in Rabat, Morocco. I never actually got to go, but I did get to meet with people who had grown up there and lived there their entire lives. And I got to see the difference between the way that they interact there and the way that we interact here. So even through a limited environment, I got to learn more about their culture that they had, and also with other projects that we had in our NSLI class. It can also open you up to a vast array of experiences, and it allows you to learn how to interact with others. So a main part of what these 3 are talking about is learning how to work with others who come from a different viewpoint. So that's one of the main characteristics of NSLI, because it's such a diverse place. You're with people from different states, first of all. You're with people from all over the United States, and you're in a different country, or you're with a teacher maybe in a different country as well. So all of that together kind of shapes you into a person who truly is, relishes the idea of how true and important culture is in relations with others. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I cut a little bit there. Are we all good now? All right. So here are just a couple of pictures from my NSLI experience that kind of related to the concept of citizen diplomacy. So in the top left and the bottom right corner of the slide, you can see that we're all wearing aprons in the top left one. In the bottom right, we all have a bunch of food. So that was when our teacher, it was the last day of class, a perfect way to end it off. But we made a Moroccan dish. It's made of couscous, rice, raisins, carrots, chicken, a lot of stuff kind of all thrown together into a pot. But, you know, in the end, when I ended up having it, it was amazing. I think still to this day, I started eating couscous a lot more just because of that. But that's the concept of learning their culture. So we learned how to make a dish, and we ate a dish from Morocco that we would have done in person. You know, being online, that is one aspect that sometimes is hard to control, but they did their best, and it ended up working out amazing. So in the top right, that was the flyer for when she was going to come visit us. So a little bit more about Umaima. She worked at a bakery in Morocco that hires only people with special needs. So the people that work with her may be blind, may be deaf, may be physically incapable of walking, for example. So that's the specific people who they employ at their bakery. And she came and spoke to us. She's had a number of successful businesses in the past as well. And it was truly an honor and a pleasure to speak with her, and the insight that she brought onto working with Moroccan people. And that was another way that we got to meet with people from a different country, even when we were, you know, sitting in our bedrooms here halfway across the world. Bottom left corner, that was kind of just a fun thing that we did with all the people in our class. We all gave presentations on different countries in the Middle East. So I gave a presentation on Jordan. We had people give presentations on Morocco, Palestine, Yemen. So while doing research about that, we learned about the history of the country. We learned about the culture of the country. We learned about its background and where, you know, what their people do on a day-to-day basis, what they wear, their clothes, whatnot. So even while we were here, learning more about Middle. And then the middle right there, his face isn't showing, his dog's face is showing instead. But on the middle row in the far right, we spoke with a we spoke with a diplomat stationed in Jordan who was actually a NSLI alum. And we talked with him about his experiences and, you know, what he did in the NSLI program and how that helped him, you know, become what he did. You know, at the beginning, he was thinking of going down a completely different route, like an engineering route, I think he mentioned. And now he's a diplomat halfway across the world. So it truly shows you the impact of how NSLI can change your life into doing something that, you know, you may have never thought that you would be able to do. So I think that's it for me. Next, I think it's Diana.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mohammed. I'll get started on my presentation. And I'm Diana. This is me about citizen diplomacy. So I'm going to focus more on citizen diplomacy on a personal level. The focus is on 4 specific areas, like inside the classroom, outside the classroom, with friends, and with the host family. So firstly, it's inside the classroom. The photo on the upper right-hand corner is a photo of my NSLI Arabic class. While we were in person, so no one socially distanced or wearing masks since 2017. But I really enjoyed my NSLI summer program because there were 14 students and 13 of us came from different states in the United States. So even though we're all Americans, we were literally coming from every coast and every region of the United States and places that I had even ever heard of, nor have I yet to visit myself in the US. So that was a really awesome thing to share kind of my experiences living and growing up in Chicago and learn more about like Washington State or Vermont or Nevada. And not only that, but with Moroccans. So, and the photo on the left, as well as the bottom photo, are some photos with my Moroccan peers when I attended a Moroccan high school. Being able to be a senior or in like deuxième année bac or Sanatenia baccalaureus, I guess if you want in Arabic, it was really interesting because you can compare like how the education systems are different and how they're really similar. Like at the end of the year in America, you can take like AP exams or you take final exams. While in Morocco, students have the baccalaureate test to make sure they graduate, similar to how like Americans have finals. However, their test kind of covers multiple years and multiple semesters of curriculum, while it's just one curriculum or one semester of curriculum in a semester. Not only that, making friends and taking classes in a different language, like specifically French and Arabic, was a really incredible experience. And getting to know and make friends that are of the same age in Morocco was also amazing. One specific example of this is one time a student, we were just talking about like kind of where I grew up and like how my school experiences were in the US. And I remember this vividly, a student asked me if every American is just like me. And to me, that took me a little bit aback. I was like, of course, no American is really like me. Like I'm from the Midwest, someone can be from the West Coast. And you can have just like so many different influential like parts of your life that can be different, even though we're still like Americans. So just being able to say like, oh no, Americans are very like have different backgrounds and have different family makeups and grow up in different states and different regions, and just kind of giving like one image to like what an American is, was incredible. Next slide, please. So outside the classroom, on the right, that's a photo of when my NSLI cohort and I went to a local Moroccan high school in Tamata. So it's a neighboring city of Rabat, Morocco, to the south. And we went with local Moroccans, part of the community, and painted that mural. So it's halfway done, but we painted the rest, as well as we planted trees in the courtyard of that high school. So being able to not only visit another Moroccan high school, being able to interact and also give back to a community was a really awesome time. And you're able to like communicate and work with peers around your same age group as well. On the left, that's a photo from the IEWN conference in 2017. It just so happened that year it was held in Rabat, Morocco, in Marrakesh, Morocco. And so my NSLI cohort and I all went. We were able to meet teens not only that were Moroccan, but from countries such as like Japan and Turkey. And it was such an international conference with other international educators as well. So being able to represent the US and kind of give a face to what American teens are like, to not only Moroccans, but also in a very international cohort was awesome. Next slide, please. So for friends, and I think being like with NSLI, you're put with language partners, so other peers that you can practice your language with, and they kind of become friends, or I made friends from high school and just locals in the community. So the bottom right-hand corner, that's when two of my friends and I, Manala and Samira, we went ice skating, which isn't an activity you think of doing in Morocco, but there is an ice skating rink, and actually Manal to the far left in the photo, she's on the ice skating team, so she definitely skated circles around my other friend and I. But it was awesome to spend time, and even outside of like a formalized setting, to be able to have conversations about what's going on in our lives, and be able to practice the language and use it in a real sense to make personal relationships. Similarly, on the upper right, I got really close to another student. Her name was Fatima Zahara, and it's actually her more people in her family in the other photo, and we're having a large dish of couscous for a common Friday afternoon lunch. And her and I ended up being very close and making close contact with her family. So I went to her house like after school, and we were able to like make couscous together with her mom, which was a really special experience to have. Next slide. Okay, so lastly, with my host family, a part of a really incredible part of the NSLI experience is living with the host family. Not only being able to learn a language in the classroom, but being at home and being able to fully immerse yourself in the culture by living with the host family, living with locals of that community. So you're able to practice language 24/7 if you want. And I remember after dinner, in Morocco, you have dinner a little bit later. So sometimes like 9 or 10 p.m. After dinner, we cleaned up all the dishes, put them away, washed them, and finished that. And I was starting to do homework in the living room. And as always, like in Morocco, the TV is often on. And so my whole family was just casually watching TV while I was getting some Arabic homework done or just reviewing vocab from the day. And I remember that Keeping Up with the Kardashians was actually playing on the TV, which was a very interesting experience because I had never watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians in the US. It was in English, but with Arabic subtitles. So I consider that studying Arabic by just trying to read the subtitles or picking up what I can understand. But it really hit me that there's a lot that other people are, specifically like when I saw like Moroccans consuming like American media, like if that's all that they're seeing of what Americans are like, of course Americans aren't like the Kardashian family, or I don't think a lot of Americans live like that. At least I don't. And it was interesting to think that if this is what Moroccans are seeing of what Americans are like, is that what some people might think what Americans are actually like in real life? So I think it was really a formative experience to understand that the type of media is very influential to what people might perceive Americans as, and to be able to kind of counter that as a actual American, not that Kardashians aren't actual, I guess a more ordinary American than the Kardashian family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, we have Emma up now.
Hi, I'm Emma. I participated in the NSLI-Y Russian program this summer. My program was based in Moldova, but was switched to a virtual format, and I studied Russian from my home in New Orleans, Louisiana. So throughout my presentation, I hope to emphasize how you can increase your cultural literacy and expand your cultural diplomacy through a virtual setup. Next slide, please. So just a broad overview of what our classes look like. Our morning language classes started off immediately with Russian. So speaking only Russian in the early morning to the early afternoon was very helpful in feeling completely immersed and also feeling connected to the language. So the structure of our classes allowed for a very open dialogue, all in Russian, of course. So for me, through these person-to-person interactions with my teacher, who was from St. Petersburg, was the most influential part of my time at NSLIY. I felt closest to citizen diplomacy through learning about the nuances of culture, specifically very culture-specific things, ranging in everything from formalities to superstitions. For example, my teacher was quite persistent on the superstition that it was considered bad luck to give someone an even number of flowers, which was something I was not really aware of before NSLI. So with fascinating information like this, being in a classroom with a native Russian speaker every day, we were able to learn the unspoken aspects of culture and like the values, the idiomatics and history of these areas, which really had a crucial impact in broadening my cultural literacy and appreciation for foreign culture. So my favorite activities in class were singing along to Russian children's cartoons and also performing scripted dialogue with my classmates. The mouse below on your left is a popular cartoon character that's saying "Какой чудесный день" or "What a beautiful day" in English. And singing along with him in the morning always woke us up and brightened our day. And it also served as an interesting comparison to American cartoons. And we also had projects and we had performances that surrounded aspects of Moldovan and Russian culture. And we were always practicing scripted dialogue, actually, that was about what a typical conversation in Russian was supposed to sound like. So repeating this every day with my teacher gave me a feel of of what it meant to be Russian, and also what the day-to-day of a Russian speaker looked like. And this helped my exposure to, and really my appreciation for these foreign customs and traditions. Slide, please. So still continuing with class time. So like above all, I found that culture class expanded my cultural literacy by giving me a hands-on approach to grasping the Moldovan way of life. My teachers provided recipes for traditional Moldovan cuisine, and I made mamaliga, which is showed below. It was basically butter and corn grits that is typically eaten like rice in Moldova. And while my other friends made golubtsi, which is cabbage rolls, and blinis, which you might be familiar with. To broaden our cultural knowledge, we watched the Soviet film The Diamond Arm, and it was really a hilarious movie, and my classmates and I still joke about the slapstick humor that was in that movie. And our teacher gave us truly fascinating insights on Soviet scenery and Soviet actors, and we exchanged notes with her about the differences between American movies that we knew and the Soviet movies that she grew up with. So that was probably like my favorite day in class. And I also found that knowing these aspects of food and films that are unique and important to a particular culture gave me the opportunity to engage with something that I wasn't quite familiar with, but at the same time, it grew my understanding and appreciation for cultural differences. And I'm sorry about that. And NSLI sent us matryoshka dolls, which are nesting dolls to decorate, which I thought was the most fun part of our curriculum. Our assignment was to research and decorate them with images from Russian and Moldovan culture. Some of our classmates decorated them with traditional Moldovan clothing, and I decorated them with like architectural design and also important figures like Pushkin. And matryoshka dolls are symbolic and representative of the culture of Russian-speaking countries. So having the opportunity to engage with this tradition and research important figures in Eastern European history is something that truly opened up dialogue and discussion. And it really made us honestly more excited to explore and embrace this foreign culture. So kind of like this is what we saw on your right. We were given a live virtual tour of Chisinau. A native Moldovan zoomed us while walking around Chisinau city center, and we saw all the main sites, and we also learned about every structure's historical background and cultural significance. And it was really an experience that was as close as possible to the real thing if we were there. And following the tour, we also were able to ask questions about Moldova, and we found many architectural similarities to the city center of Chisinau and to the city center of our homes in the United States. So, for example, the Triumphal Arch in Chisinau's Great National Assembly Square looked very strikingly similar to the Washington Square Arch in Manhattan. So in this way, we connected on a higher level that made us realize that even though we're halfway across the world from each other, how similar our cultures actually are. Next slide, please. So across our 6-week program, we had 7 guest speakers. As you can see, NSLI-Y invited a wide range of perspectives from country directors to local restaurant entrepreneurs, and they spanned across many different Russian-speaking countries, and they were very excited and very eager to share their experiences and their knowledge with us. And the screenshot on the right is what most of our meetings look like. And personally, my favorite speaker was David Smith and Vlad Shuliansky. Their mission is to fight corruption in Moldova by running a completely bribe-free business, all while serving up authentic American barbecue. And I found their desire to challenge these norms and commitment to local entrepreneurship and also startups to be very inspiring. And they also gave us very invaluable insight into how Soviet past has influenced government and politics, and also bureaucracy that small businesses face in Moldova. Next slide, please. So finally, I was part of the journalism team for our group. Our Moldovan journalism team wrote pieces on BSI events, like activities which featured guests and program impact. And we also worked alongside the Estonia journalism team. And I found it to be very interesting to connect with students who were studying in a different Russian-speaking country. So through this journalism and writing about our experiences, my horizons were really broadened, and I was able to form connections with my fellow students, even though we weren't exactly in the same program. And in the setting of reporting, research on our countries, collaboration, and also like exchanging ideas, we in a way became like fledgling diplomats. We represented our respective countries and grew connection with its people and culture. And even at the end of our program, our teams continue to talk about our passions for journalism and the Russian language. And we have made it our mission to continue as citizen diplomats. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Emma. And next we have Xenia, our last presenter.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So my name is Xenia, and I'm from Carl, Pennsylvania, and I also participated in the Arabic Summer 2020 BSI program. It was run through IRN, and specifically my teachers were from the Kalamalo Center, which is in Rabat, Morocco. And my favorite word that I learned during my NSLI program was hawiya, which means identity. So there you go, you've all learned one word in Arabic officially. It was my favorite word because of all the unique conversations we were able to have regarding our identity as Americans and Moroccans. And if you're interested in hearing more about my story, even after I'm finished, I encourage you all, even if you're not interested in Arabic, any other language NSLI-Y is offering, go check out NSLI-Y Interactive. My story was published there just last month, and there's lots of other great stories there about alumni experiences and what they're doing. So next slide, please. So before I started my time with NSLI this summer, I did study Arabic about a full year before. I did a summer immersion program with Middlebury before, and then I studied at Dickinson, which is in my community. But my senior year of high school was really concentrated on researching Lala As-Saidi, who is from Morocco. And I surveyed 457 students through a variety of classes in my high school with their general thoughts regarding the Middle East and current events going on, what their thoughts on gender and gender divisions are. And then I also asked them to interpret some art by Lala As-Saidi. So the two photographs you see with the calligraphy covered, the women covered in calligraphy are by her. And what she's specifically doing in these photographs is she's challenging the ideas and representations typically of the West of Eastern cultures, and really throwing it back at them. So if you see the Ingres painting, which is down in the middle, that's in the Louvre, and it's an exact, she's playing off of it in the same title, Le Grand Odalisque, to challenge what typically is divided between the East and the West. So a really big part for me is understanding with Arabic, the typical portrayal and thoughts and experiences surrounding two different cultures. Next slide, please. So having this information probably definitely contributed to my understanding of citizen diplomacy, which I'm calling a working definition, because I know that this is going to change throughout life as I have more experiences and meet new people. But currently through my NSLI-Y Arabic program, my definition of citizen diplomacy is forming personal relationships with individuals who might seem originally different you through open dialogue. So citizen diplomacy is personal connections that are honest and genuine, and it's something that's dynamic. It's not limited, and it involves both parties. It's very much an exchange so that you can all understand each other. So I'm going to go into a little bit about how my NSLI-Y experience helped me do that. So next slide. So my class was extremely small. There was me and one other student in my class. I'll have a picture in the next slide, but because we were so small, we had a very structured curriculum with a textbook and everything, but we were able to have a lot of personal conversations. Class lasted for 2 hours every day. It was from 8 in the morning to 10, and then there was usually an activity afterwards. So we had lots of time to ask lots of questions and for personal inquiry and just trying to understand the curriculum. But we also had the ability to do lots of projects and research. My favorite part of the program was how we spoke Arabic all the time. Because I was in an intermediate class, we really could do that. And being in Arabic all the time, even though we're on Microsoft Teams all the time, it made me vulnerable because it pushed me out of my comfort zone again. It was about knowing that this wasn't my culture. It was okay to be vulnerable and make mistakes. It allowed me to maximize my learning by admitting that there's things I don't know, and that also goes for culture, and to really learn from others. And in Arabic all the time means that grammar and all those explanations were also in Arabic. I think I heard my professor say maybe 3 words in English, which was amazing. But he had to do a lot of visual explanations of grammar, which I had never encountered before. So on the right corner, I took a picture of my notebook where we were explaining kind of how to form a more complex sentence. And you can see all my colors that are coded and the numbers that I've had in there. To really understand a new way of thinking, and that was completely new for me. And all the teachers in our programs, I got to know almost all of them, and they were all very united. They came to all of our presentations and cultural events, and they were all just very generally supportive. And on the left was just my setup. That was what every day looked like for me at my dining room table. So next slide. So this was my final project I did for my Arabic class that we presented on. I made a Moroccan meal for my parents' anniversary dinner. So you can see tagine, which is a traditional Moroccan stew with like vegetables or fish or chicken. So that was what I made, a chicken tagine, some olives, which are traditional staple in the Middle East, and Arab bread. Zalouk, which is like kind of like a eggplant kind of dip, and couscous. We all love that, Moroccan rice. And some ghaiba, which are traditional like shortbread cookie in the Middle East. So this allowed me to do my own research and still have cultural explanation from my kitchen in America. So next slide. So this was a picture of my class. It was just my teacher and then us. It was like having personal tutoring every day. And we got to know each other extremely well. Because we could talk so much. So every day we could start with, how are you? What's going on? What did you do yesterday? What are you doing this weekend? Talk about our families. And we got to have complex conversations too about what it meant to be a Moroccan and what it meant to be American, such as immigration and stereotypes. And that really contributed to, even though we're living in the same pandemic, we all have multiple perspectives on that. It was interesting to talk about different ways our countries are handling the pandemic and how individuals feel within the countries about the pandemic and the challenges we were facing at the same time too. What his plans at the school were to teach in the fall, what our plans for going back to school were in the fall. And our class also fell during Eid al-Adha, which is the holiest day in Islam. And usually Moroccans, they sacrifice a goat. And my professor, I would have been great to be there, but he actually had a goat in his house. So this whole week, I got very attached to the goat. It would sometimes jump up behind him if he got out of its pen in the house, and it was crying the whole time. So it was very sad to say goodbye to the goat. But that was a really interesting thing that does not happen in your traditional American Arabic class. I wish it did, but that's not too common. But being off of that, I got to learn a lot more about Islam. I did not know about Eid al-Adha and the traditions that go along with it. And being able to do that really had, your story matters. I could talk about holidays that are traditions for me as a Christian, for Muslims, and how it's an exchange between us, because your story and your perspective really do matter because we're all different. So next slide. And finally, the purposeful and open dialogue also went along with cultural workshops we did. We did various tours that's seen in the top photo. We did a tour of Rabat. We did calligraphy classes. Several guests came and we did some cooking classes. And it really, we had final presentations that were between all of the students in the school, and we got to listen to each other. And an open dialogue between different cultures that we could ask questions and interact with each other. I mean, for one writing assignment, for example, I wrote about Thanksgiving, and I was teaching Moroccans about Thanksgiving, and they were teaching me about something like Eid al-Adha. So it's this exchange between two different worlds to learn both about different cultures. Moroccans learning about America, and Americans learning about Morocco. So, and the bottom picture was from our calligraphy class. So it was a very dynamic exchange of conversation. So final slide, please. So really my big takeaways from NSLIY was the various forms of communication that I had through learning vocab and grammar, but also having the freedom to have daily conversations, to get to know each other personally and share about ourselves and our own identity. Arabic all the time really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and really showed that I was vulnerable and that there was more for me to learn. So that really opened the doors to a cultural exchange, because it admitted that I need to learn from somebody else. And finally, cultural exchange was very important. It was knowing that my voice mattered, my perspective matters. The education was not just for students, it was also for leaving our international teachers with good impressions of Americans, that were people who are responsible and culturally aware. And so we could have an exchange between two parties. So cultural diplomacy, in conclusion, is really about forming your diverse relationships that can allow both parties to grow and make a more peaceful world through personal relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a beautiful thought for the final presentation. We're going to move quickly into our Q&A part of the event. I'm going to ask just a few questions because I know we're running a little bit short on time. So I'll ask probably just one of our speakers to respond to each question rather than each one. So first, I'm going to start with those who participated in the virtual summer programs. I'm sure a lot of us are curious, and so am I, to think of an instance when you made a connection with someone from the host country. It could have been maybe a teacher or a peer. If someone can maybe tell us about how you made that connection virtually.
I guess I can go first. So since my class was so small, I got to know my teacher very well. And I think that connection just became through talking a lot. And I got to know, for example, like his sister lived in Italy, and he taught us about like the struggle of getting visas in Morocco, and how like immigrants, and like there's a lot of European Moroccans who immigrate to Europe. So I think that cultural exchange really came through personal experiences and sharing your story.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna just move on to the next question just in light of time. Diana, I'm directing this question to you. I'm curious because you kind of mentioned specifically how you dispelled maybe some ideas that people had about Americans. Can you maybe think of a time when you had your own idea about how maybe you thought Moroccans were going to be, and that stereotype was kind of taken apart, or something you experienced that you didn't expect?
Yeah. So like Morocco is a very religious country. And like the call to prayer is like played out 5 times a day. And there are often public prayer services on Fridays. Like men pray like literally in the street, like they would close the street down. And so it's very, very prominent in the culture. However, I did meet about 2 or 3 or a handful of people who are about college age, and they were less like conservative and less religious, which is really interesting. And they were talking about how Ramadan is and how they're spending time with their family, but sometimes like their views on religion might conflict with their elder family members. So although Morocco is 99% Muslim, like not all people have the same like religiosity and same views about Islam.
Thank you for sharing. I have a few more questions, but I think I'm just going to ask one more so that the audience has a chance. And this question anyone can answer, so feel free to jump in. I'm curious, what do you all think is the relationship between learning languages and citizen ambassadorship or citizen diplomacy? And how can it be useful to learn a language in order to engage in citizen diplomacy?
So I'll go ahead and answer a little bit. So I think that along with learning a language comes with learning their culture. And I know that happened with me, even though I was online, where, you know, our teacher was from Morocco initially. She lives in Florida, but she was born and raised in Morocco. And, you know, the things that she talked about that she experienced, and the kind of the research that we did about different countries, about Morocco in particular, I think that along with learning the language comes an innate learning of the culture. And that really helps when you're being a citizen diplomat, because I mean, one, the obvious, you can kind of speak their language. Like literally you can speak their language. And knowing more about a culture can help you relate to a person a little bit better. You know, learning the perspective that somebody else is coming from. You know, if in Morocco, as Diana mentioned, if some may be, you know, very conservative and very religious, you know, that's something that you can use when talking with somebody, and, you know, maybe seeing a viewpoint from their eyes. If, you know, if they have a specific viewpoint on a particular issue, you can see that, hey, they're very conservative and religious in this country. Maybe that's a reason why they have that opinion of themselves. So I think that along with learning a language comes with learning the culture, and then learning the culture is just, it will always help you in, you know, relating to people from other countries.
Great, thank you. So I'd love to let the audience ask a few questions. You can use the raise hand function so I know who is interested in asking. You can also feel free to type it to me directly as a message and I can ask some of the participants. But please don't be shy and feel free to ask. Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat box and seeing what's coming in. I did receive one question already by private message. So since I don't see any raised hands yet, I'm going to ask that one. So the question is for Diana, and it's essentially, how did you spend your free time while you were on program? What did you do when you were not in the classroom?
Yeah, I did a lot actually. I actually joined a Taekwondo team when I was abroad, which is something I did not expect to do whatsoever. It was a great way to stay fit. And Taekwondo or Judo, I know someone doing like a boxing club or like a kickboxing club. So sports is always like a really great way, and something that I think all nations kind of, it's a universal thing you can bond together with. I also enjoyed going to libraries. So I ended up getting 3 different library membership cards in the city of Rabat. So in just one city, I had 3 different library cards. One at Institut Français, so the French Institute, one at Maktaba al-Wataniya, or Bibliothèque Nationale, and so it's like the National Library, and I had one at the, I think it's the French Institute, which, or I'm sorry, the Spanish Institute, which I don't speak Spanish, so it was very interesting I'm getting that. But it was very interesting to like be able to read literature and to be able to meet other students who were studying these languages. And particularly at the National Library, it was a very common space for college students to go and study, because it was located right in the heart of the city and right in the heart of one of the campuses in Rabat. So I'd also really like to journal. It's something I always tell students to do when they're abroad. Always journal and record things. So it was a really great time to kind of sit down and be by yourself, and even make a few friends to study with who are locals.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. I think Keely has a question.
Yes, Keely. Hi, everyone. So anyone can answer this question. How do you guys kind of battle like stress overload when it comes to learning new grammar and new vocab and having formed sentences and the culture, like all of that stuff? You know, how do you deal with that and battle with that? Because I know it is stressful even if you're doing the virtual event. So how would you go about doing that? Any advice?
I can take that question. So I found that, like, I think that it was just I'm not, like, I think that the experience might have differed a little bit from Diana, because learning on a virtual format is completely different from being in the country and being immersed in the language. So learning on a virtual format, like, I even apply this to like my college classes now, but I made sure to like have my own study space to devote a particular amount of time and like have a very like a very structured schedule. That really helped me. It's kind of it was like I was in the foreign country and I had my own time periods. I think that was really helpful. And then also for learning grammar, I mean repetition is key. I learned like grammar and vocabulary a lot through Quizlet, and so just like going over it and self-study is really important.
if I could add just a little bit, I know we're short in time, but a lot of times friends that you make in the class really help you. And I feel like Xenia might have had a little bit more with this because she had one classmate which she could form a really strong bond with. But even me, like I had a pretty reasonably small class. And you know, I could always rely on my fellow students and my fellow peers and the friends. You know, if I ever wanted to practice after school, I would just like FaceTime them and be like, hey, let's work on this together. So a lot of times friends around you help you too.
Great, thank you. So it seems oh, okay, I see Mia has a question.
Hello. So I regarding like once you take the first how like advanced
I mean, I think we're having some issues hearing you. So maybe type your question into the chat. It might be easier if you can do that quickly. Okay, we'll just wait a moment for hopefully that question to arrive. Okay. All right, here we go. How advanced do you become in fluency or speaking in your respected language?
I can take this. Oh,
Yeah, go.
okay,
ahead,
so
Sia.
I only had 4 weeks and I had 2 hours every day on the computer. But I originally started my OPI proficiency test at the beginning was I believe intermediate mid, and by the end of the program, 4 weeks, I reached my speaking level was advanced low. So that was incredible growth. Usually, as you get higher up, it's harder to move up, and especially just move up 2 levels. That was really impressive. So you definitely learn a lot, even if it's through a virtual program, through constant speaking and interaction. So don't worry about that.
Diana, do you want to quickly share and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, I'd say I went to Morocco not knowing a lick of Arabic, having a little bit of pre-program preparation, but I came out as like an intermediate, and I think you definitely learn by either thinking or swimming. And so if you need to figure out how to like order something at a restaurant or communicate with your host family, you definitely have to figure it out on the fly and use whatever means necessary. So, and I think the NSLIY program does a really good job of teaching you formally, and then you kind of have to do the rest and take those parts and implement it into the real world.
All right, so I know there's a few more questions, but it's just a minute left. So to respect everyone's time, I'm gonna wrap it up here and have one final slide with information. If you can show that, Ligaya, please. So this is just a few more resources for especially those that are prospective applicants to find out even more about NSLI. You might already be aware of them, but I really want to draw attention. There's the NSLI for Youth page if you want to learn more about the NSLI program and application. And then also, as Xenia mentioned earlier, if you want to read specifically about like student stories and alumni stories about their NSLI program experience, I definitely encourage you to check out NSLI Interactive. So these 2 sites will answer a lot of the questions that you may have. I'm also going to ask one more thing of all the attendees before you go. I'm going to be sending a link to an kind of exit survey. If everyone could just take a minute of their time to complete it, it will help us create even better events in the future. I know it's a little small thing, but I promise it will be super quick. But besides that, thank you so much to everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. And a huge thank you especially to our alumni speakers who were all fantastic. So thank you so much everyone for coming. Again, I'll put the survey into the chat one more time. Please enter that if you can. Thank you so much, everyone.